you for those joining from home. Apologies for the stop-start. We've just set back the Transport Infrastructure Committee meeting so we can have this really, really important discussion. So we have one more request for a question from the floor, which I will take from Councillor Gates.
Thank you. And it just relates to the concern expressed by Councillor Doran and Councillor Lacastra about our green waste sites, sure, which made me think we did have a proposal at one point in time for a green waste site at Suntown Tip. And I can't remember what happened with that. I'm just asking that officers refresh my memory. Is that still something that's being considered or yet to come forward, or has it started?
Through the chair, no, a paper was brought back, I think, maybe August last year, where the use of that for waste functions was taken away.
Looking at the site for best use.
So it was used for filming, but is that a long-term with the other investment that we're making in film in terms of Yatala and Miami? Is there the likelihood of a green pad at Suntown or not?
Councillor, through the chair, part of the resolution for that one was to take that off the table at green waste pad, and for a broader land use study to be undertaken to determine the best value use for that site, which included, and councillors were quite specific, beyond commercial use to potential community use, with consideration to existing tenants that we have there, so the motocross club and the men's shed.
I remember now.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we are doing a broader study on that.
I'm sorry, I had a brain fade.
Not a problem. Thanks, Councillor Gates. I will just offer any final questions before we have a look at the changed recommendation. So as it stands at the moment, we have a proposed changed recommendation moved by myself. That has been circulated. You've had that for some time now. I am seeking a seconder, and I will open debate. Thanks. Councillor Young will second that item. So thank you so much to officers. It's certainly been a marathon and some really, really important discussion that was prefixed by incredibly comprehensive report that sought to really frame the problem quite comprehensively. Whilst I will note there was some concern about the report attempting to address many quite controversial issues all at once, I actually see so much value in the fact that we're attacking this problem in all of its collective glory, because I think it's very necessary for the responsible decision-making process that we are attempting to resolve with what is a very multi-layered problem. This change recommendation is in no way a reflection of a concern that I had for the original recommendation. However, in the same vein as my previous statement, I do think that revisiting and finalising the problem when we get to budget, where we can see exactly the consequences of retaining our current model, makes sense and may help us to better understand the consequences of all the options put before us. The reality is we are running out of landfill, and despite a variety of measures taken across the last decade, including extensive education campaigns, we have not seen a meaningful improvement in our efforts to divert recycling from landfill. With that, I'll leave it as my opening statement, and we'll invite anybody else. We'll invite anybody to speak against the recommendation. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I can't support this, and the main reason is that it is effectively a transfer of decision-making from an open, public, transparent environment into a closed environment. And I do not think that that is helpful in any way. That's effectively, by adding number 4, it just basically means the whole report we're putting into a closed item. I don't think that serves us or the community. Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak again? Wishing to speak for? Thanks, Councillor Tozer.
I think the conversation today, I'm not on this committee, but I think the conversation today has been really interesting. Everyone's been very engaged in the process, and it's been great to see the officers who put such an effort and time into trying to come up with a way to make our waste business, sustainable. And I mean sustainable not in an environmental sense. I mean sustainable as in the amount of revenue that we that we take from the ratepayer covers the cost of actually running the business, because that's an obligation that we have when it comes to our waste business. And sometimes there are government services that local government is responsible, that councils are responsible for, where that just isn't the case. We provide services and there isn't a fee. It's the role of government to play in that, we provide a service that doesn't have we never cover the cost. That's what the broader property rates are for. The waste business is a bit different in that we have an obligation under the relevant legislation to make sure our waste business is, the costs charged cover the costs of operation. And our ongoing future capital costs as well. So we don't just have to cover the cost of, running the business today. We actually have to draw from the rate base enough money not just to run the business, but to plan for the future of the business. And that is profoundly different to most of the things that we do. The reason I think this is important is because the special budget so many of the inputs and variables in this decision are driven by different areas of the budget. Even the way we construct the rates notice has got to come into it, and frankly, I'm not sure the Waste Committee can really appropriately and properly provide an informed recommendation about changes to the rates notice in the context of the gravity of this decision. This decision is one of the biggest decisions we probably made as a council, because it relates to a multi-million-dollar separate entity, effectively separately operated area of our council. What I like about this is it does defer to the Special Budget Committee and that whole of city process that goes with special budget, but it also acknowledges very clearly to the public the specific elements that we're considering. And I say that in the context of, A to F talks about Currumbin and Numbamba closing from 1st of July. And I feel frustrated by that as a local councillor, because Numbamba is in my area. But I'm also not interested in continuing to operate a business that is susceptible to dumping by commercial operators from New South Wales every day either. That's not okay. I don't want us to have a space that New South Wales operators can just drive up privately. There's no cameras there. We can't put cameras in there because of the tree cover and dumping there. We need to, that's frustrating to me. But I think we've actually, we haven't been secretive about this decision. This particular report is in public domain, so anyone can read it. There's no secretiveness that's going to happen in special budget outside the elements of the budget considerations that should and quite appropriately are confidential. The elements that we're deciding are stipulated here, and between now and in March, when our special budget committee convenes, there'll be plenty of time and plenty of media interest and plenty of conversations that councillors can have with their communities about the impact of this decision. I think this proposal appropriately defers an important decision, flags to the public the implications of that decision and the specifics of it, and enables all councillors to not jump the gun on what is such a critical financial decision for us. And I hope that you support, even though I can't vote today, I hope that you support the Chair today in this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Tozer. Someone speaking against the motion. I've got Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers who have withstood a few hours of questioning and presenting today, and I appreciate that's not easy. I don't support the recommendation today because I don't think that we've appropriately taken the community on the journey. I think that there's good intentions in the report around a communication strategy after the decision is made. It is my preference that the city begin that difficult conversation with the community around what problems we're trying to address and also how we're going to address them. And that quite explicitly is around the user pays model. I think the first time the community were made aware of this particular matter was in the newspaper on Monday. And I feel as if that isn't sufficient for such a significant change to what is essentially our core business as a council. With one of our core businesses is, race, roads and rubbish. I think that we also need to acknowledge that the city has done and before my time, it has done an exceptional job in creating efficiencies within its organisation through the restructure. And I note that in the bulletin on the 31st of January, the CEO was quoted as saying there's more than $175 million in savings to Gold Coast ratepayers generally from the work that's being done. It's my view that that is something that is going to get lost in the conversation around hitting constituents with a charge to take their rubbish to the tip. What it does do in the context of bringing it up, Chair, is it does buy us time to start to engage with the community in an appropriate way because we have got those efficiencies in the system. I think that there will be an increase in illegal dumping, and I think the officers acknowledge this, albeit it's unknown as to how much, and there is measures within the report to mitigate it. But that's the first thing that we all think about is the cost of illegal dumping, and I don't feel as if so far in the report or so far in today's discussion that we've appropriately addressed that in my mind. I understand two big things in this, what this is trying to address, Chair. We're trying to change behaviour, and that's an important element because so far, from what we were told today, so far the soft power to address behaviour change has only worked to a level, and we need to address it even further. And one of the levers that a government organisation has is the influence of financial penalty to influence behaviour. And I think that's quite rightly the proposal that's being put forward. And it's not dissimilar to, for example, a tax on cigarettes to change behaviour. But again, I don't believe as if we've taken the community on the journey to help go with us as to how we're going to address that challenge. And I think we also got to acknowledge more to the community that the biggest problem we're trying to address here as a city is the levy imposed by the state government. And Chair, if I just would like to touch on that for a moment, because the levy is again a financial penalty designed to change behaviour, but from state to local government. And in that context, I think that there's no other city in Australia that is addressing their responsibilities to change behaviour than this council. We have and we are investing in an advanced resource recovery centre that essentially is the change that the state is looking for from that levy. And so you couldn't ask for a more model council that is addressing a serious challenge in the future than this one right now. And so we are trying to address a structural problem in a business, and it is significant, and we also have some challenges around the network, which is something that is not insignificant. But my non-support of this particular agenda item is that we should not be explaining why this is good for the community. We should trust them enough to take them on the journey with us over the course of a period. And if it looks if it looks like through feedback that in the future we have support for these changes because we've told them it's important, we've addressed it with them along the way, and then we have a level of support, as well as in the meantime looking for efficiencies and looking to address whatever other structural changes we can. And I think that the city will be in a much better position to have acceptance of whatever changes are needed from the community, and ultimately that's what we're here to do, is to represent our community. So I don't support this change recommendation. I obviously have a foreshadow that's on the table, and I'll ask councillors to support that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Doran. Councillor Young, would you like to speak for?
I'm not sure what the foreshadowed motion is, but we're dealing with this motion, and compared with the officer's recommendation, I support this. What is it? Pardon me? Okay. So this makes an express decision not to do particular things, the foreshadowed motion, and to do others, whereas the motion before us that we're debating says we're mindful of all these things, we need to note that, we need to deliberate on those things during the budget process, and I appreciate Councillor Patterson's concern that that's in a closed session. It doesn't have to be. That's our decision at the time. We can make that debate open. But it also commits to further communication and discussion with the whole community, and I think it gives us a window of time here before implementing any changes that are really time critical in the middle of the year. We've got the opportunity to absorb the commentary from the community and go out to them and get a really sharp focus on this before we discuss it at budget in open session if we want to. And I am very mindful that the whole business of waste is enormously complex, and we're dealing with lots of different levers, you might say, and different issues, and we're trying to address each of them. We've obviously failed strongly in bringing the community with us on the journey and having them understand their obligations, and that it's not just council making decisions, that the whole community has got to be involved and contribute to the outcomes that we're collectively seeking, essentially to divert waste from landfill and recover and recycle as much product as we can. We're really failing in that, and I think that's a central thing that we have to accept and address. And so any attention to this matter, I think, is healthy from the public perception, and will help us in our deliberations and help us determine how best to bring the community along the line with us. Your motion before us doesn't make it a clear decision about implementing any of the changes that were recommended to us, and it gives us that extra time, and that's why I'm supporting it. And for the reasons that I've identified before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Speaking against the motion is Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll keep mine brief. I want to echo some of the sentiments of what Councillor Doran has actually expressed today, and I agree with most of his commentary. And I would add that whilst I believe that this is a great report, and I do thank city officers for bringing it forward, it hasn't quite landed where I'd hoped it had landed today. Saying that, I do acknowledge that obviously the consideration of things like the bulky waste expansion and reducing our operational costs are a necessity for doing business, but as to how we actually deliver that, I'm not convinced as far as what it could look like in its entirety yet. I would note that there were a number of concerns from others that were raised through this whole conversation, whether they be around green pads, whether they be around CTS, whether it be about community engagement. And unfortunately, with regards to that consideration between what's community engagement and what's considered to be community outreach, I was hopeful that we would have something perhaps that brought the community along for the journey a little bit before we actually even got to budget deliberations, which from what I can anticipate from having a more of a, we may be able to go down a micro level, but more of a larger say, I don't believe that sounds like it's practically possible, which I can appreciate. I understand there's structure around these things. But my hope is that actually when we do get to budget, perhaps this time round, is that full cost pricing model is obviously presented and we can actually have further deliberations from there. And again, from that, take the community around that educational approach and have them feel part of this conversation further to what they had already presented to us as part of the Towards Zero surveys and things like that, where they presented what their ideal direction was going to be, but now we have some sensible options on the table that really they should be advised about, educated on, and also given the consideration to what they would like to see in their entirety. So for those reasons, I'm speaking against it today, and I look forward to hopefully seeking to support the shadow recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Do I have anyone wish to speak for? I'll take the opportunity to close debate as the.
I would like to speak against, and I did have my hand up. I mean, it's up to you as a chair, but as a divisional councillor, where this affects it, that's fine. But I'll just have even more to say at council, but that's fine if you want to go down that track.
Okay, I'm happy to reserve my statements for close. So if there's no one else that wishes to speak for, I will revert to Councillor Castro speaking against the item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's appreciated. Look, there's been a lot of conversation around the public, the communication, consultation, and that is of vital importance. We've seen what happened when we didn't communicate things too well with something just recently, and then when we really don't want to be going down that same path again. So I do believe that we need to be going back out to the public and explaining quite clearly. So don't get me wrong, I think something has to happen. The goalposts have moved, there is no doubt about it, to what we had before since the introduction of the waste levy. So the fact is that in some way, we've got to work out how we're going to be able to deliver that waste service without major impact or the least impact on the public. So we need to go out and sell that story of this is a case, it's reducing every year, and these are the options available. But if you go out and do a survey and say, you know, do you want to see more recycling? Do you want to see this? Do you want to see, you know, do you want to see more recycling? I mean, Councillor Doran and I spoke about this before. Answer, yes. You know, would you like to see, you know, cheaper? Would you like to pay for dumping your waste? No. You know, so if you frame any question framed in a particular way, you can get the answer that you want to get. But we need to be more open with the public and explain, take them on this journey so they understand what we're facing as a council and why there need to be changes. So that's the first one. That's why I believe that we do need to delay this to make sure we don't make mistakes from the past. So, but now I actually want to come to something that hasn't been spoken about at all here. And from my point of view, and I know also from Councillor Doran's point of view, and it will actually affect other divisions, Division 9 as well, but more so Division 8 and Division 11, is this closure of the green waste pad at Merrimack. And we really need to actually look at the real reasons behind this. We had this conversation before, and I said I'll speak about this in debate. And we need to look at what those impacts are, and there are many. The green waste pad at Merrimack, firstly, when I asked the question about why, you know, why the presentation rates, the available capacity in the bins, was only outlined for, say, Carrara, Mermaid Waters, Merrimack, Robina, those areas, and not anywhere else in the city. And we've heard that basically the capacities are exactly the same. It was, well, that's not the reason we're suggesting the closure. So then when we actually spoke about the 25% reduction, when Councillor Gates asked the question, we know that there's been a reduction and we haven't got those figures, but we'll get those figures back. And clearly if the capacities in the bins is the same across the board, then we're going to have a similar case. That's why we've rolled out the green bins, to actually reduce the amount of green waste having to go to the green pads, hopefully, and rather than people putting them in for landfill. But again, it was like, well, that's not the reason. So the reason that the suggestion is of closing the green waste pad is very, very simply that we need to expand the wastewater, the treatment plant, okay, the treatment plant, and that's got to be done. You know, no qualms with that. That's got to be done. So then you actually say, well, okay, so if the reason isn't because there's more capacity in the bins and people can use those bins, but that's the same argument for the whole city. And if it isn't because there's a 25% reduction, you know, we wouldn't be closing it. We're only closing it because of this. Then that actually tells you something, doesn't it? It actually tells you that if we didn't have to expand the treatment plant, we wouldn't be closing this pad. We wouldn't be closing it. So it kills the argument totally. It's like, well, that's not the reason, and you can't use it as an argument, because if you did, you close every green waste pad in the city because there's a 25% reduction and everyone's got 40% average capacity in their bins. So that clearly tells you that you need the waste pad there. Now, to further actually support that, we've also heard, well, you know, this was only a temporary measure. A temporary measure to me is maybe 6 months, maybe 2 years. This green pad has been there for 7 years. 7 years, and yet we're trying to go out to the public and say this is a temporary site. 2018, okay? So if we go out there and say, well, this is temporary, that's very hard to tell and I'll give you the number of people who are visiting the WRC at Merrimack, whether they're visiting it for green waste or whether they're visiting it for other reasons, it's 165,200 and something people per year. Okay, so people might only go there once or twice a year to dump off bulky goods, but people are going there on a far more regular basis to dump green waste. Now, there may be a capacity of 40% on average, and sure, that's true across the city. But there are times, certain times of the year, when you've actually got a lot of green waste. I mean, I for instance, once or twice a year will take 3 carloads, because of we tell people to plant trees, we encourage people to plant trees, and we want to green up the city. People do that, and of course, there's maintenance that's needed. A couple of times of the year, I will fill up the car 3 times. I can't get it in the bin, and I have to take it to the Merrimack transfer station, to the green waste pad. So when you actually look at that, there will be times when people need to use it. If they don't do that, because you're taking that facility away, more of that will go into the general waste bin, and then it will go to landfill. The last thing we need is green waste going to landfill, because we then say, well, okay, the report says, well, you know, for the average Division 8 resident and Division 11, it's going to be a 6 to 12 minute extra drive. If you actually look at the closest to, I'm thinking Clear Island Waters here, Reedy Creek would be the closest transfer station. If you actually just do a basic Google search and say Clear Island Waters to Reedy Creek Waste Treatment Plant, it will tell you 18 minutes. 18 minutes. So we're saying a 6 to 12 extra. Well, it may be a lot more than that. So also you've got all the works that have been going on for years and years and going to go on for a lot longer on the Pacific Highway. You cannot get to Reedy Creek in 20 minutes. And even if you could get to Reedy Creek in 20 minutes, you've got 20 minutes there, you've got 20 minutes back, and because you've now got another 165,000 people who can't dump their waste, their green waste at Merrimack, they're also going to have potentially longer waiting times because you've got 165,000 people going there. So therefore, in a round trip, in real terms, you can be looking at an hour. If you've got 3 carloads of waste twice a year, that's 3 hours that you're going to be driving backwards and forwards. Do you think people are going to do that? And okay, you can put the green waste. Why I asked the question? You can put it in a flexi skip. But you can only do that once a year. You can't do it twice a year. And if you do that, you've used up your get out of jail free card for when you want to use it to put your bulky waste in. So that's not going to work either. The other thing I wanted to point out was when we actually looked at the cost factor, and I just need to find this one. This is the cost, not the cost factor. Where is it? Just bear me. Sorry, here we go. When we actually looked at the net cost, the Merrimack net cost is actually lower than Jacobs Well. It's lower than Helensvale, but we're not looking at taking green pads away from Helensvale or Jacobs Well. We're looking to. Sorry, that was Pimpamar. Yeah, okay. But what I'm saying is, the cost, the net cost factor is lower. That was in the report, which brings me back again to the only reason we're doing it is because of the wastewater, the water treatment plant, which then brings us to something that hasn't even been discussed. No one's even mentioned it, even though it's in the report. If you go to Appendix F, which actually gives you 5 options on site for another green pad. 3 of those options from memory, I'd have to look again. I looked at it again yesterday, are totally unviable. There's no doubt about it. But there is one that is very viable. We actually have land available on site. The report also said that the price could be up to 5.8 million. The one, 5B, have a look at it in Appendix F, is 3.9 million. It ticks every box. is something like 4,500 square metres. It's above the Q20. There's room for operational access on site. Has minimal impacts on koala fodder, whereas where the others had much more impact. And when we're talking about savings of 100 million, 175 million, whatever it's got, wow, this council has never been better off. And yet what we're saying is we can't spend 3.9 million to put a green pad, to keep a green pad there that's been there for 7 years, which has a lower cost than other transfer facilities that waste transfer facilities that I've mentioned, which accommodates 70% of the people who are actually going to Helens, which one is it? Reedy Creek, Helensvale. I know it's about 70%. I wrote it down. I'll find the one. Here we go. When you work that out, it's actually 70% of Mollendina's traffic that is going to that Merrimack waste transfer. And the green waste, as I say, is something that you're doing on a regular basis. The other things are things you might do once or twice a year. So there is absolutely no valid or logical argument to close it down. You're going to force people into doing a 1 hour round trip, and they're not going to do it. And as I say, certain times of the year, it's going to be 3 hours. We've got the money. The other thing that this council has promised ratepayers is there will be no cuts to frontline services. Now, I think waste is a frontline service, and every single thing I've given you stacks up to tell you we need to have a green waste. So I've got a minute left. Is that right?
Point of order.
That's good. I'm just
Chair. I mean, I don't understand why we're having all this debate, because this is not the motion. The motion is that council notes these things are in the report. It doesn't say we're going to do this.
No, it doesn't. It actually it notes the things in the report, and one of the things in the report is that we're going to close down the Merrimack green pad. So I'm sorry, it does. It notes the things in the report, and that is noted.
It's
so what I'm saying is, I cannot support this motion for all the reasons I've given, not just about the green pad, but I've given you all the reasons why it should remain, but also because of that public consultation and making sure we do this properly. There is no logical, valid reason that you can sell to the public as to why we should adopt this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Lacastra. If there's no one left speaking for, I will take this opportunity as the mover of the motion to close debate. I, like Councillor Young and Councillor Tozer, refute the accusations that the transfer of a finalised decision being made during budget is hiding this discussion. I think the process and the resultant motion is a very transparent representation of the mindset in which we would be entering into budget conversations with. We have heard previous mention of risk profiling, and I will acknowledge that we set our legal and compliance measures at conservative. We must be operating our waste business at full cost. We are legally prohibited from offsetting the cost of the waste business using savings efficiencies made elsewhere. I don't personally see, through the evidence provided, how we could achieve this without the measures highlighted within this recommendation. I also refute that we have not taken the community on this journey. The principles that inform this strategy were through a community survey that had the second highest uptake of any survey last year. They were coupled with a towards zero waste strategy that we endorsed only 2 committees ago. They've been in the public realm. I note the concern regarding insufficient consultation moving forward, but I refute that there's been any sort of failure in that regard. I personally cannot fathom how something with as much clickbait worth as introducing tip fees could possibly have been signalled to the community before we as council had been presented the full situation represented within this report. The survey itself positioned the principles that drove the subsequent strategy and the report we see before us today. I would like to note the extraordinary past achievements of the communication delivered by the waste officers. We had a rollout of a green curbside bin that in other jurisdictions and councils was extremely controversial, and we had a rate of a 1% complaint rate across the whole city. They are experts in this field, and I trust them completely that they know how to do community consultation correctly, and will be delivering that through the methodology proposed in this resolution. I acknowledge that a voucher system is something that some councillors would like to support. I think this would neutralise concerns, but I also think it neutralises the positive outcomes that we're seeking. There will still be no incentive to recycle when you're visiting a WRC. There would be minimal cost offset after the use of the vouchers, and so we would be in almost an identical situation as that we're in now, but made a whole heap more stressful and complicated regarding the administration burden and how we would manage how tenants would access these voucher systems. Noting in the resolution as it stands, nothing precludes us from including a voucher system during the budget deliberations. I want to touch on illegal dumping points, as that's been raised significantly throughout the debate. We already see unacceptable amounts of illegal dumping, despite the fact that we have these free services. We've gone down that point. If we keep operating a business model on an empty tank, we will never be able to introduce the measures that might actually attempt to address that problem. Critically, our current model, if sustained or prolonged through a voucher system, rewards landfill waste creators at the expense of those making efforts to reduce their waste to landfill and their environmental impact. I, as a leader in 2025, cannot accept that as responsible, and I'm not alone. This is clearly reflected in the outcomes of a comprehensive survey from our community. They flocked in numbers to contribute to that survey, and I think we have a responsibility to hear their words. So with that, I will close debate. Division is called. All those in favour? So,
Councillor Curtis, Councillor Young.
All those opposed?
Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Castro, Councillor Doran.
So that motion is defeated. The foreshadowed motion becomes the live motion, so we'll bring that one up on the screen. That was moved by Councillor Doran. Do we want to have questions before we seek a seconder? Are there any questions? Okay, before I seek a seconder, Director, would you like to make comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and just wanted to offer some comments with this foreshadowed motion with regard to point 3, the endorsement to create a new permanent green organics drop-and-go pad at Merrimack. So just to be advised, councillors, that we would anticipate if we were to proceed with that action, there would be a delay of implementation of that new pad by at least 1 year. So between closing the existing pad and the creation of the new pad, at least 1 year. So it's just something to be advised of, that those residents would need to go to an alternative site for that period of time. And absolutely can deliver on all the remaining components, but I also just wanted to make a comment on item 6, that a report be brought forward. So we provided a report last year to WWE that talked to all the waste streams and our programs to increase resource recovery through all the waste streams of council. In addition, we have detailed our strategy for increasing resource recovery in the Towards Zero Waste plan as well. What we've proposed today is above and beyond addressing that. There's only so much we can go with that strategy to increase resource recovery, and that's certainly the intention of the proposed recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Tozer, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Gates.
Could you ask a question about option 5B? When you said there's a year delay, is that because the 5B option is in a different location on the site to where the current green waste pad is? Help me understand the delay, the particulars around that delay.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, because the existing pad would be required for the expansion of the STP,
Yes.
and that's due to be closed in July this year, from July this year.
So if we do proceed with 5B, pursuant to some resolution of council, there will still be a delay between 1 July 2025 and when we could get this operational.
That's correct.
Sorry, I had Councillor Patterson next, and then Councillor Gase, then Councillor Castro.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a question through you to Councillor Doran. I was completely persuaded by what Councillor Lacastra had to say, but I do think it would be worth us just having, I suppose, a bit more detail on that matter, and 1 and 2 to not be necessarily making those decisions today. So my request would be whether he would consider a change which would take off 1, 2 and 3. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't do it. It's not saying that when we are closing the green pod, but there's a potential. No, it's not at all like the original motion, because, and I will say this, because you made a point of order to state that that motion didn't suggest that that would be done in budget, and 2 minutes later the chair said we have been transparent to the community because we've laid out here what it is that we're recommending to do in budget. So it is very, very different.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you,
There's a question through to Councillor Doran.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. So Councillor Patterson asked about the consideration for 1, 2 and 3, and if you permit me, I'll just explain why. This foreshadow motion, now I'm not speaking to a chair, but just to answer Councillor Patterson's question, foreshadowed motion intended here is to continue engagement. It's not to make a new decision where the officer's recommendation is to close. What I'm suggesting here is that we don't endorse that today, but it does not, in my view, Chair, prohibit the future discussions once we've gone on a journey and doing something else in the future. That's the intent behind 1, 2, 3.
Well, if I may, through you to Councillor Doran, I think that intent is still kept whilst removing it. And what I'm really clear about is we're taking this to full council, and I want a committee recommendation that everybody can get on board with. If you take that item out, that doesn't change it. We're still not closing it. It's just we're not being explicit on that right now. That's all. But it's up to Councillor Doran.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you. I don't get a vote today, but I couldn't support this come full council. But I did have a question about point number 3, and through you, Chair, to the officers, that additional $3.9 million of expenditure, does that, the waste business would have to find those dollars, and that worsens the position that you've spent so long explaining to us today, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's correct. That would be required.
If I may, I just want to mention that in, I think it was 2009 or 10, we closed the Pimpamar waste facility, and at that time when I supported its closure, I was given a commitment that we'd have a new centre by 2012. I know it appeared as 2012 today, but that new facility has never been established. It meant that some residents had more than a 20-minute drive to get to one of our waste disposal facilities, and I just want to assure other representatives here today that that had no massive impact. People got used to it and adapted to it. I think we have to, and the only reason I supported closure was to reduce costs, because we have such great facilities, and we have a couple of real beauties now. And I mean, as far as Merrimac's concerned, it's a toss-up whether to go to Merrimack or Mollendina if you live in that central area of the Gold Coast. So I wouldn't be able to support this foreshadowed motion in any way at council unless there was further reports on 1, 2 and 3. I don't agree that we should just today not endorse the closure of Currumbin. I don't feel that I have sufficient information to take that decision. I don't think I could support number 2, and I certainly can't support number 3 without the experienced officers telling me what the consequences of that might be. So that's my 2 penneth worth.
Councillor Castro.
Sorry, we know what the consequences are. It's $3.9 million. I'm sorry. I'm a bit confused as to what. So the question is, what consequences apart from the cost, which I'm saying is a valid cost in the scheme of things with the dollars that we've got. Sorry, and the fact that you can't support it because you didn't get Pimpamar, and you're saying so you can't support this one.
No, I'm simply mentioning Pimpamar because it was a massive change for community. But the community accepted the reasons why is what I'm trying to express here, and that sometimes we have to make really tough decisions on the basis of the numbers before us. And I'm not comfortable that we have enough information. I couldn't support a $3.6 million cost earlier in this committee today for a project, and I certainly can't support another $3.9 million cost in the current circumstances without a full report from the officers.
Well, we've had the full report. We know how many people are using. I'm sorry, I'm entering into debate here, but we know how many people are using it. We know that it's the same situation with everyone else as far as the capacity. We know how long it's going to take people to get somewhere else. We know it's going to end up in general waste. If it ends up in general waste, we know it ends up in landfill, and then that's something we're trying to reduce because that costs us more money. So I think it is outlined in the report. So I can't understand what more you need to know about number 3. I pointed out we've got land on site. Everything has been pointed out as to why it makes no sense to take it away, and you're taking away frontline service. What more do you need to know?
What I need to know, Councillor Lacastre, and I don't intend to debate you.
Sorry, through the chair, that was.
The fact is that this is a waste network plan, so it involves every element of our service to the community in regards to waste collection. The green pad is just simply one of them. We've heard that Suntown didn't go ahead. Maybe there's a stronger argument for a new pad at Merrimack. I don't know that that's the case at the moment because Suntown wasn't mentioned. So I just stand by what I feel, and you're welcome to have your opinion, and it's respected. But
I'm going to jump in because I feel like we are now edging into debate, and at the moment the foreshadowed motion does not have a seconder, so I'll call for a seconder for the foreshadowed motion. That's seconded by Councillor Castro has seconded the foreshadowed motion. Are we still on, just for the interest of keeping everything fair, is it a question or?
Considered wording it perhaps for Councillor Doran if he would indulge it, and it was only very minor in that respect. Councillor Doran, just at number 3, would you consider that instead of it reading as is, it reads that Council notes Merrimack WRC shown as option 5B in Appendix F as an option above Q20 provides minimum koala fodder impact and is of a scale sufficient to accommodating future population growth for consideration to adopt at a future budget committee, which doesn't, where we're saying we're endorsing it and creating it, that's saying today that that's where we're at. I certainly respect Councillor Lacastre.
Subject to special budget committees. You're asking to add those words?
Yeah, correct.
Great. Can you add those words? Subject to vote?
Okay.
Did you have to?
Yeah.
You can't make a financial decision.
So just procedurally, Councillor Wilkinson, because I already accepted the seconder for the foreshadowed motion as it stands, we have to debate it as it stands or have an amended foreshadowed motion. So they're the options on the table.
So by the permission of the mover and seconder, you as the chair can amend the motion if you like, or you can force an amendment. I mean, That has been our practice, even though maybe that doesn't align with the local law.
So we can...
we have been, if the mover and the seconder are comfortable adding the words subject to special budget committee.
I will leave that for Councillor Doran and Councillor Castro.
They may not want to. If they don't want to, then there'll have to be an amendment.
Have a little chat about and get back to me.
Sorry, just a question here. I mean, in the end, whether that's stated or not, it has to be decided that way anyway, so it doesn't matter whether it's part of the motion or not.
So will I take it that you are not accepting the amendment?
Chair, with all due respect to my colleagues and Councillor Wilkinson's suggestion, at this stage, and Councillor Patterson's at this stage, I'm not prepared to change the foreshadowed motion.
Thank you. Great. So we have a mover, we have a seconder, and if there are no further questions, we are ready to open debate, and I will pass to you.
Question?
Just in the nick of time, Councillor Taser.
Sorry, yeah.
Off you go.
So my question is actually about Section 5 and Section 6 of the motion being considered. And my question is through you to the Director or to the EGM. The substance of those proposed reports, could you... Do you think there would be anything substantive in delivering those reports than what has already been provided to this committee in the past 6 months via other reports?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, with the exception of more detailed plan around the community engagement. So we are already working towards that, and we can certainly provide more detail around what that actually looks like and timelines around community engagement communications.
Yeah. The reason I ask is I'm not on this committee, but my recollection is there has been reports provided about the waste network strategy that would capture 6 and at least a reasonable portion of 5 and probably some of 4. Am I reading that correctly, or is there new information since the most recent reports that would...
Through the Chair, no, there would be no new information with regard to increasing resource recovery rates than what's been provided last year at WWEC committees.
Thank you. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, if that's it for questions. Councillor Doran, would you like to open debate?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody, for your indulgence. It's been a long one today. I spoke earlier around the reasons why I didn't support the change recommendation, and I hope I won't relitigate previous statements, but I'd like to talk to why this foreshadowed motion has been, how it's been developed, and just address a couple of other matters that were brought up in the previous discussion. So the intent behind this foreshadowed motion is to reverse the communication strategy from the recommendation from city officers. It's to go and engage with the community first and then come back with their feedback as to how we address some serious challenges relating to this business. The survey that we've referenced earlier from with regards to the amount of people that contributed to it was great, but from my understanding it did not include what facilities we were going to close. We did not ask them for that advice. We did not ask them about gate fees, and that's been canvassed earlier in this meeting as to why that wasn't brought up. And whilst I don't discount the involvement, I don't discount the feedback, I do discount the transfer of that feedback to this decision-making process, because there are some key pieces of information there that, in my opinion, that the community should have been told. With regards to having the discussion in special budget, you know, I didn't make any accusations that would be hiding or anything like that. I would make that on the record, but I do believe that we should be talking about it here today because it's been canvassed this week publicly, and when we get into special budget forum, as Councillor Young indicated, it's a choice, but you know, as a new councillor, it has been enclosed 100% of the times I've been involved, which is once. Okay, so and I think with regards to the specifics 1 to 7, So we're saying not today. I don't believe, given the fact that we're here at 2:04 and we started at 9 o'clock, that we had all the information clearly, because we've asked so many questions and we've been involved in such a long debate, that you can expect that that would be transferred to the community, because we've had so many questions about this program, and some things we've learned about for the first time today, and I'm going to forget the name, but it was in relation to Smarty Grants. I think I might have mentioned it was the first time we've heard that today, and that was mentioned as a potential solution for some of our multi-unit res. In relation to number 3 at Merrimack, the green organics drop, I represent Robina, and Robina is just to the south of the Merrimack Waste Recycling Centre. I actually went there on the weekend, did a bit of research, loaded up my car, and it was busy. And I endorse everything that Councillor LaCastra has said in support of keeping a facility open at Merrimack, and that's why I was not prepared to remove it from this foreshadowed motion. My inclusion of point 4 in relation to the illegal dumping mitigation is actually just a refinement of the recommendation from city officers. And I've done that because we do have too many illegal dumping right now. And I think that, and this is going to be a consistent thing as I talk to about the report coming back about the rate of recycling, I think that we do need to continue to look at new and innovative ideas as to how we can stop and improve our illegal dumping in the city, because it has been mentioned here today that cost the city, I think $7 million was the sum, and it could be more. So I don't think that's a bad thing to go to ask city officers, the experts, to go back and have a think of what else we can come up with, think differently, think outside the box. And if that's nothing, so be it. But I don't think that exercise is futile. In relation to a report coming back in relation to outlining comprehensive strategy on community sustained communications, that's an opportunity, Chair, to go out into the community and express the problem that we have and take them on a journey. And that's the bit that I think that, as I said right at the start, that I'd like to see happen in this space, because it is an important change and because the community has voiced their concerns that it is important to them as well. And then with regards to a report coming back to this committee in relation to initiatives for recycling and general diversion, I do note the comments from the director earlier around the work that's already been done here, and I welcome it. But what I'm suggesting there is that, once again, the council, if we endorse this today and if it's ratified, there's still a lot of steps to happen, is saying that we want to try to do other things, we want to do more, and we want you to have another think about it. And, again, that's asking you guys to think outside the box. And in relation to point 7, I'll be very brief on this one, because we have a new government. The new government has, at the general manager's comments, not at this stage been on the record around this particular levy, this waste disposal levy, Queensland waste disposal levy, that has caused us to have to address these concerns, hasn't been addressed by the new state government. I mentioned in my previous discussion around the change motion that the change recommendation, that we as a city are doing more to show that we're being responsible in this space than almost any other council in Australia. And, asking them to confirm that they are going to continue it in its current form, to me, is a responsible first step before we place a burden on our constituents. And we should, in that letter, in my humble opinion, reference the innovative work that this council is doing in relation to the ARC. I hope the councillors will support the foreshadowed motion today, and I'd ask them to consider, when doing so, that we do have full council coming up, and to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good in this motion today. Thank you.
Speaking against, Councillor Young.
Yep. Thanks, Chair. This is a very poor motion, I'm afraid. The original motion, which obviously has been lost, sought to acknowledge things that were in the report and have budget committee deliberate everything in the full context. This one actually makes decisions and then says, let's go and talk to the community. Well, no, it doesn't even say that. There's no mention here of what the charging regime is going to be. Are we going to apply tip fees? Are we going to provide vouchers? Are we going to just increase the costs? There's nothing mentioned whatsoever. So that's just a silent thing on a very, very important aspect of the whole report and the recommendations that we should be making to council. So there's no mention of the charging aspects, except we've made some decisions here, or if we endorse this resolution, this motion, we will have made decisions which I think are going to cost an additional $4.2 million initially. I might be wrong, but I think it's 3.9 is the cost of this green waste pad 5B, and to keep Currumbin and Numinbah open, it's about $300,000 a year. I might be wrong, but I've taken that from the report. So, pardon me? Thank you. So $4.2 million we've just added to the budget, which has got to be taken from people that use the waste facilities through the charges that we apply or through the gate fees that we haven't determined or resolved. So we've just added $4.2 million to the pie, and there's no talk about now going out to the people and asking what they want, because we've already made the decision. There's no provision here whatsoever to engage the community about charging or closures. There's no mention of the charging regime. It's a really fundamentally flawed motion. I would have been quite prepared to support provisions for the green waste facility at at Merrimack, because I think that the more we can provide for people and give people the opportunity to come along and use the facilities, the more opportunity we've got to divert waste from landfill, and that's the key. That's really got to be our focus. But we've got no discussion or deliberation about what the implications of that are. Okay, there's $3.9 million we just added to the bill. How are we going to recover that? What impact is that going to have on the levy that we apply to people, or the charges that we apply, or the vouchers that we issue? None whatsoever. And so just to mention the Special Budget Committee, it is entirely up to committee at the time to go into closed session or not. In the recent history, it's always the case that we go into closed session. In 2008 and around there, we had all the budget deliberations completely in open session, everyone, and there was never any danger, there was no problem, there was no compromise or jeopardy or anything like that. It was just a completely open and transparent process, and everybody benefited from that. So that's open to us by decision at the start of each committee meeting, or indeed dealing with each item individually. So I encourage that consideration. Sorry, I can't support the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Young. Someone to speak for the motion? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. And it's not a perfect motion, I would say. And I do share some of Councillor Young's concerns. But there are some key reasons why this is the motion that I'm comfortable to support. We started this morning, or when we came in here, thinking that we were going to be considering an officer recommendation. That got taken from us when we sat down for whatever reason. And then it changed from the officer recommendation to a recommendation to make all those decisions that had all the information in here that we came in here ready to make a decision on, and to defer that to budget, to defer that to another time, without suggesting that there was any need for any further information, that there was anything additional that was going to be required, that stopped us making the decision today and instead made the decision in budget. My concerns with doing it in budget are on a number of perspectives. The first is, we have had a 5-hour discussion on this today, and I would say 20% max was about budget. So there's a reason why these things don't happen in budget. The vast majority of this conversation is not related to budget. So if we have another 5-hour conversation, that's going to have a pretty significant impact on our budget time and management, because that isn't actually what budget committees are for. The reasons why I couldn't support the officer recommendation, and the second one, which I think is, and I don't know, Chair, you said that you thought this had been transparent with because it made a signal to the public that this is what the recommendations are that we're going to consider in budget, effectively saying, look, we're looking at this and we're going to tinker with numbers. There were a few things that I couldn't support that on. The first one, as I mentioned, I have been asking about bulky curbside waste every 3 months since I was elected in 2020. Somehow, even though that has an impact, that doesn't get determined until after we make this significant decision. That doesn't make much sense. It does have an impact, and the report refers to it. So the report refers to, and we need to do this for curbside, but we haven't got the recommendation yet. We're just hoping that it's right in March, and we don't know what the resolution or outcome will be. The second is dumping. The report says that we need to create new strategies to work on our dumping. Well, the time for that is before this, not after this. Because if you do it before, you're dealing with the real issue is why are people still dumping even though it doesn't cost them a thing? So I have concerns that both of those are not addressed prior to this rather significant change for our community being made. The third one, community consultation. It was suggested to us that there was community consultation. We went out there and said, do you want to do it on a user pays? It was stated that we couldn't say that it was gated fees because people wouldn't like it. Well, I'm going to come back to that because I don't think that what is recommended to us is user pay at all. The third issue is the voucher system. So we're trying to tinker this together, and what it looks like where we would be heading towards is to somehow make this palatable, is to put in a system that every other council is waving a red flag at us and saying, whatever you do, do not put that in because of the operational costs and creating effectively a new market on the side, all these problems. So I'm going to get to the fundamental issue I see with the original officer recommendation, which is effectively what we're talking about. User pays. That's what we're talking about. Unfortunately, the recommendation isn't addressing user pays. It's addressing the thing that kind of fits best because we can't actually do what is user pays. And what is user pays is weight. That is what it is. If we wanted to work out if you're paying for your use, you're paying for weight. We've decided that that's too difficult, too expensive, so we're not looking at that. Well, if we're not looking at that, that is negating user pays. Just putting in based on trips doesn't mean you've got a new user pays model. So for all of these reasons, even though I'm not 1,000% supportive of all elements in here, for me it's the best that I can support today. And it's going to be an interesting conversation again at full council. And I really hope that this conversation, which is a tiny amount about budget and a lot about a lot of other things, does not end up in budget because it's just for the consideration of everything else we're going to think about in budget as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. I'm going to speak against the motion and I'm going to attempt to be very succinct. The green pad cost must come from the waste business, a business already under an immense pressure to sustain itself. To come out of this meeting further away from any solution to the problem outlines than where we started, and a $3.9 million bill to boot, apart from feeling like a massive failure as a chair, troubles me deeply. I would caution this committee in endorsing an expense of such significance without any of the necessary evidence to support it. I would also like to point out that point 7, which I believe is being relied upon to do a lot of the heavy lifting here in terms of offsetting the cost, the state's levy is doing exactly what it was intended to do, forcing local governments into a corner and forcing a transition to a circular economy. That will not happen organically and through lots and lots of really well-meaning conversations. It will happen by forcing the hand and investing in the economy and the economy that will sustain it. As a resident and representative of Paradise Point, we lost our closest green pad some time ago as part of earlier network efficiency measures, and I feel a great sense of unfairness at the prospect of investing such significant funding to perpetuate a model elsewhere that is not supported by the broader network strategy. I would implore members of this committee to consider Councillor Young's earlier very noteworthy points about the failings of this recommendation as it stands. We're going to close, Councillor Doran, or do you want another 4?
I'll speak for, yeah. Look, contrary to what Councillor Young has said, I believe that it doesn't throw everything out at all. Number 5 actually covers it, that a report be brought back to a future Water Waste Energy Committee. It speaks about a comprehensive strategy to inform the Gold Coast community via sustained communications, and this is what I spoke about before. We haven't gone out and literally asked the basic question of, and I acknowledge, and I did acknowledge when I spoke, that we need to do something as far as because of the waste levy. So I'm not saying, let's not do anything. This doesn't say let's not do anything. It's saying let's take them on the journey with us, because the survey that we've done to date, it is not a proper community consultation. It's not specific. We need to ask the specific questions. We need to outline that the waste levy is in place. We need to get people to understand that's reducing each year, and that is going to have to be picked up by the ratepayer. And would you rather be having a voucher system, for once or twice a year and then pay after that? Would you rather go straight to payment for dumping your bulky waste, then point out that it doesn't affect green waste, it doesn't affect recycling, etc., and pointing out that that if not, it means a charge, an extra charge on the waste on the waste charges for every ratepayer in the city. But at the moment, they don't understand that, and we made this same mistake when we changed the rating structure. When we had that presentation to us at the last meeting, I personally, and I had a conversation with one of my constituents about it yesterday, who wasn't happy with the fact they were paying more living in a unit on a higher floor. And I was able to explain it and articulate it a lot better than I could before, because we had so much more information at hand. And if we'd had that information as thorough as that information and that presentation was, we wouldn't have had half the pain. If we go out and just say, well, look, we're doing it anyway, so now we're going to consult with you, now that we've decided this is, what we're doing, we're in for a world of pain. So this doesn't preclude that. We're saying go out, but let's take the community on the journey with us so they fully understand it, rather than Chinese whispers, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and then everyone gets upset, gets annoyed because they don't understand it. It's imperative that we do that. The other point that I would make, and I'm going to go back to number 3 through you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, because you just mentioned about the $3.9 million and a huge expense. What price and this is a rhetorical question, but what price do you put on spending $3.9 million to make sure that you keep open, that you keep open services that are frontline services? What we're talking about here is, what we're saying to the community of Knott is saying, well, we're not going to spend $3.9 million. You just have to go without. I'm sorry, because we can't afford it. But we have said we will not cut frontline services. Waste is a frontline service, and I don't think anyone here can argue with me that it's not. And what we are effectively doing, if we don't go with 3, is we are cutting a frontline service. Now, if anyone wants to go out and sell that, well, good luck to you. But, that's great. And you just tell them, well, we had to do it because it was $3.9 million. And as the chair of the committee, you might have to go out and sell that, or the mayor might have to sell that. But it's a very hard sell, I can tell you, because you cannot argue that it's not a frontline service. So this covers everything that was in the other, that was in the initial with your motion. In that sense, we're still going out to the community. All we're doing is we're making it clear to the public that we're not going to cut their frontline services. That's really basically the only change.
Councillor Tozer, would you like to speak against?
Yes, please. I don't get a vote today, but I think there's some real challenges with this motion, and primarily the issue with the motion is that it actually doesn't address what's in the report. The report that we've considered today as part of this decision is effectively what is 4, 5 and 6 when you count all of the other reports we've had over the last 12 months. There is nothing, the Executive General Manager has told us there's nothing really additional that can be provided by officers to address 4, 5 and 6 beyond, which is what is already in the report. And so we come to this decision that's really actually captured on page 55 of this open and transparent report. And on page 55 of the report, it talks about the levy per tonne, which is imposed by the Queensland, the state, going from 23-24, going from $105 up to 27-28, going to $145 per tonne. That's about a 40% increase over that amount of time, and it's going from a 95% subsidy or / rebate down to a 40% or 50% rebate during that time, meaning that the cost of disposing waste for the council is going to go up at the same time as the subsidy that mitigates the cost of that to us is going to go down. There is no doubt that there is a greater cost on council, and there's no more information that anyone could be provided to get away from that reality. In fact, item 3 in this resolution, I could support. If the council resolves that we keep the green waste and it costs $3.9 million, I actually think that's a substantive decision that makes some sense. I think that does make sense. The fact is, however, that would cost just in the first year $15 per 60, $15.60 per ratepayer to deliver if we levied them all for that. So that puts upward pressure on the waste utility charge that we already have. And I think that is it's really it might have merit in its own right, but this resolution doesn't deal with the substantive issue, which is that the Queensland Waste Disposal Levy is increasing at the same time as the subsidy rebate for that levy is decreasing, and we have to deal with that. There's an ideological thing here. There's going to be a cost. It's going to be about $108 million over 8 years, and there are two ways we can try to mitigate that cost. One is we could increase the waste utility charge on every ratepayer, and that is one way that we can cover that additional cost. The other option is that we could try to mitigate the cost by introducing a gate fee for people who use the tips, and that's another option. We might even want to use a combination of both of those things. Those decisions about things like gate fees and waste utility charges are appropriately and properly dealt with by the Special Budget Committee. And that's really what the officer's recommendation said. Hey, you need to make some ideological decisions today about what you're going to do, and then we need to refer the financial decisions to the Special Budget Committee. This resolution doesn't do either of those things. In fact, it does really the opposite, with the exception of 3, which might be a decision that could be referred to a Special Budget Committee. And when we ask people, we haven't taken them on the journey, the reality is we have taken them on the journey. Over the last 13 years, I've been a part of the Waste Committee at different times, and we have constantly talked about the increasing cost of waste. I mean, we're just about to spend some $1.5–2 billion on an ARC. This advanced recycling thing. It's not like that decision has come out of nowhere. It's because we've constantly had decisions with the public about what we need to do to manage the fact that there's actually not enough landfill for the amount of waste we're getting rid of. That's the reality. And the decision we're making today has a lot to do with that. And so what we did most recently, I think in 2023, we talked to 2024, we talked to people about what they might, how they might prefer their waste was charged, and 69% of the public, out of a 5,000 group of people, 69% they just prefer a user pays model. And so to me, there's the answer. That's the answer to the question today. We don't need to go back to the community and ask them again. 5,000 of them, which is a very substantial amount of people to respond to one of our surveys. In fact, I think it was the second highest last year, told us user pays was their preferred model. We have all the information we need. Finally, I want to touch on this idea of frontline services. There is no doubt that waste is a frontline service, but at least in my community, every single person, almost every single person, in fact, I think it's about 97% of my ratepayers are now entitled to book a green bin. So that they don't need to necessarily go as much. And I appreciate I have tried on a weekend sometimes to fumble my trees that have fallen down into my green bin, or there's the odd palm frond that's hard to fold up. But you know what? a pair of prune them and just chop them in half. They actually fit in. And, if I don't fit them in the first week, I can fit them in the second week. And when it gets into winter, I can put a little pile in the corner and I can put them into the green bin as I go. This idea that frontline services will diminish by us properly rationalising the cost of our services when we're delivering a curbside bin service to every ratepayer, I just think that's a ridiculous argument. Frontline services are not diminishing. We're actually providing more frontline services than we ever have before. It's an easy argument to make, and the decision that we're doing by adopting this resolution today just abdicates our responsibility to be informed by the report we have in front of us, which tells us we must move to full cost recovery for our waste service. Today's the day we need to make a recommendation to Council. We should just do that, bite the bullet and refer the financial decisions like what the gate fee might be or not be and what the waste utility charge might be or not be to the Special Budget Committee like we've done every other year. There is no reason why anyone should support this motion today, and frankly I think the best option for the committee is to make a procedural motion to refer it to full Council. I can't do that.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Tozer.
You can't foreshadow a procedural motion.
We'll bank it in the memory block. All right, so that was speaking against. Someone to speak for the recommendation. Okay, would you like to close, Councillor Dome?
Yes, please. If someone does want to move that procedural motion, it takes precedence over the motion in front of you.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge that there's some heated emotions in the room, and I think that we probably should just come back to what this foreshadowed motion is seeking to do. And I said before in my opening that I know this is not going to please everybody, and I think in the debate so far, we're seeing that some councillors are not happy with one item, and some councillors would accept that item, and some councillors might not accept another item. And I think that is a foreshadow of what might come at council. So where we are today is this particular motion, in my opinion, does give us the opportunity to go and talk to the public, and I respect the views of councillors around the previous consultation. It is just my opinion that it was insufficient because it left out some key pieces of information that I believe the public should have been armed with when making that decision. It is in no way meant to diminish the public's contribution to that. It is in no way to diminish the work of officers. It is just a view that I hold here that when we go to make such a structural change in the city, that we take them on a journey, and I respect the councillors that have been here a lot longer than I have, that this has been a matter that's been discussed many times in the past, but with the detail that the city officers want to put forward to correct the problem that's created by the state government levy, to me, is the next piece of communication. Now, I get that many of this isn't exactly what everybody wants, but this is a do no harm motion. This just basically says that we continue as we are. We seek guidance from the state because, quite frankly, we are doing what the state wants, or the previous state government wants. We are actioning our future waste issues, and it says let's take the community on a journey with us in relation to the actual details with regards to what it's going to cost to fix a structural deficit in this business. And Chair, I think the other part about the frontline services, and as I say, I respect everybody's view. This is a tough issue, and we've been here for a long time, and I respect that. But we're a growing city. We're a city that in one particular committee we're trying to plan our way to be 1 million people in 20 years' time or thereabouts. But we're also on the other side, we've got to deal with this really tough structural issue that has been discussed today, and how that is being dealt with in many ways is to reduce services, and I respect that not everyone sees it like that. But when we're growing to 1 million people and we have these services open, it stands to reason that there'll be more customers, there'll be more housing, there'll be more people using these facilities, and if you shut them, it's very hard to reopen them. As I say, I respect everybody's view here today. I believe this allows us the opportunity to continue to have a mature discussion with the public about some of the challenges we face here without imposing on them a decision here today that will come as a shock and will, as in my opinion, be not be not well received because we haven't taken them on that journey in terms of the real cost of this change. I ask councillors to support the foreshadowed motion today.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. So with that, we are taking the vote on the foreshadowed motion on the screen. All those in favour? Division is called. Councillor, oh sorry, you've got Nikki here.
Councillor Patterson, Councillor Castro, Councillor Doran.
All those opposed?
Councillor Curtis, Councillor Young, Councillor Wilkinson.
So I have the casting vote as I understand it, and I will be voting against the foreshadowed motion. I realise that that leaves us now with the original. I will. Yeah, so just to paint the picture of where we sit, we now go back to the original committee, officer recommendation. However, I think that I'm on board with what is going to be proposed here by Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. The procedural motion is that we defer the matter for consideration by full council on the 18th of February.
Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favour? All those opposed?
That was a ballsy decision, that was, I'll say, for full council. Well, we really achieved something.
Okay, that's procedural motions just getting finalised on the screen. For those playing along at home, that procedural motion has passed, and we will be deferring the motion to the full council meeting on the 18th of February 2025. So that was item 6.2. Are we going to move on to the other items? Okay. There's two. We can defer 6.5. I don't think there's a meeting before the bin days, so it might be worthy to do the quick. Or do we have a meeting before the bin change date? The March meeting is.
You're comfortable?
I think so. Okay. Sorry, having just had a quick chat to the officers and given the duration of the day so far, what we are going to do is a procedural motion to defer 6.5 because that is a presentation on food organics trial for multi-unit dwellings, and I actually know that there's a lot of residents out there that are keenly following that issue, and I don't want to rush through it. So I'm sorry if you've waited online all day to hear that one, but we will defer that to the next WWE. Excellent. The one that's remaining is 8.1, which is a request from Councillor Young for a briefing on the progress of the change of bin days. We do have a WWE before that, but it is literally the week before, and I think there's some really important information that we should probably be preloading councillors with so that we make that transition a successful one. So with your indulgence, we'll continue with the presentation of general business item 8.1.
Sorry, is it information that we couldn't receive, given it's information for all councillors? They're not going to get it at this committee meeting anyway.
Okay. Given it was driven from a request from Councillor Young, I'll defer to you for your recommendation on that option.
We could move that the presentation be referred to full council, because it would be good for all council to hear it and the public. I think that's the critical thing, that the public are along for the ride. So if you take that...
Start at 9 o'clock.
So I have a second procedural motion.
This will be for day 2 of the council meeting.
Which is that item 8.1 be deferred. The Mayor's going to be thinking, what did you even do in that committee meeting?
I know, the minutes are going to be fun.
And there was a big doozy one referred from planning last week.
You must have just left after 20 minutes. That was my fault as well. Okay.
There's a common element, Dan.
So can I please... Oh, but I don't need a seconder. Okay, so I don't need a seconder. We're moving... Sorry, guys, with your indulgence, we'll just wrap this up as quickly as possible. Item 6.5 is being deferred to the next WWE. All in favour? Anyone opposed?
Yeah, I think we should deal with it.
You want to deal with the food organics trial? Okay, that was a close vote, so I need to take it again. All in favour of deferring 6.5, the presentation of the food organics trial for multi-unit dwellings to the next WWE, raise your hand. And opposed? Okay, so that one's successful, and we will deal with that at the next WWE. The next procedural motion is for a deferral of item 8.1, a briefing on the progress of the change to bin days to full council. All in favour? Councillor Young is out of the room. I don't know whether you technically take that one. Opposed?
Is that for instead of listening to it now?
Correct.
I don't
think we should do it now.
I just think we shouldn't do it.
I'm going to take that vote again. Being very clear that the procedural motion on the board is that we defer it to full council. Raise your hands. Okay. That.
This will be just a week before the rollout.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and there's nothing else we'll be doing here.
Going. Oh, we've got one hand, two hands. I'm going to wait till Councillor Young gets to the room because I don't know what the rules are about where the barrier ends. Councillor Young's got his hands up. So that's 3 and I'm 4. Okay, great. Anyone opposed? No. Okay, so that one is deferred. Are there any general business items that arose out of today's meeting? No? Excellent. I declare the meeting closed at 14:42. Thank you very much to officers for